2 past right now. Give everybody another minute, and then we will jump in. All right. Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining the IXOPay team today to talk about the power of payment connectivity. My name is Andrew Sogren, and I'll be moderating a panel today with Yasser Abu Nasser, our SVP of Product here at IXOPay, and Kyle Cook, one of our principal product managers working on the payment connections that we develop and maintain here at IXOPay, and we're excited to host this session today. We talk about so much of this internally and all the opportunities we have to both present this out into our prospect, our client, our partner base, and to pick up your questions is an important experience for us, and we're looking forward to getting to it. So we wanted to give a little context to why we were focusing on payment connectivity today. You may have seen that we've done a small marketing campaign around this. We built a guide to payment connectivity. And if you've been following payment orchestration for its sort of adolescence, maybe starting 5 years ago into now in the 2020s where it's really starting to mature, you may have some definitions already that you're working with about orchestration as essentially a connectivity layer. And so we're going to explore, maybe update those definitions, but we wanted to seed the conversation today with just some research that Stripe put out recently about just the power of conversion lifts from adding different payment methods. I remember a couple of years PayPal put some research out that adding the PayPal button to checkout increased conversions by 28% or something like that. I mean, some number that almost seemed too good to be true. But even 2-3 years later after that research, we see things from Stripe about adding relevant local payment methods for your specific business units, as well as digital wallet integrations, going back to the PayPal, the digital pay, the Apple Pay, the Google Pay, and exactly how that can just be a straight booster shot to revenue and sales. And this is one of the primary benefits that we'll be exploring today. And again, this recent research is from Stripe that we can send out in the post here. So to start off, let's go back to what I was mentioning a moment earlier and work on our definitions here. So essentially, what is payment connectivity and why is it important today? So if I could hand it over to Kyle, how would you define payment connectivity in the modern merchant payment space? And what are the main considerations for you as you think about that definition?
A great question. And the interesting thing about that is the definition or my response has evolved over the years. Like 5 or so years ago, the answer to this question would be dependent upon the region or markets that you're participating in. So if you look at the EU markets where there's a lot of regulatory compliance in place, there's a lot of hopping across PSPs in order to make sure that you're able to interact with your customers and you're compliant, you're relevant. It's a survival mechanism for them to have so many processing connections. And those kind of relationships or scenarios didn't really exist in the US unless you're a global US merchant. But if you're a local US merchant and a domestic merchant, you can still be really big, one of the biggest players in your space, and remain domestic. So what that meant was you didn't really have all the regulatory forces causing you to have to expand your processing connectivity. You could get a lot of your success with one good PSP that had multi-acquiring relationships. So in that realm, a US merchant's mind typically was concerned about processing capacity. How many merchant accounts do I have that I can shift my processing capacity across, or my chargeback ratios? Am I able to stay under the radar of the Visas and MasterCards of the world? Well, fast forward 5 years, I feel like the world is starting to align on a singular definition. So the singular definition I'll give you today for payment connectivity is a merchant's ability to accept and securely process the preferred payment method of their customer. Now, the point I want to bring to you out is the word that's kind of bridging the gap and connecting the dots between the global experience is that word preferred. So what happened? We went from being a primarily PAN-based card swipe, everything was based on the card, to the proliferation of APMs. And with that APM launch and the click to pay, the pay by link, the buy now, pay laters, all these different technologies that are embedded within the payment flow, now you have to look at the limitations of your payment processor. Can I do everything I need to do with this one payment processor? And this is causing the market, the US market, to meet the EU and the global markets in the realm of stop looking at your payment connectivity rails as a cost center or a COG, a cost of goods sold, and starting to look at it as a growth center. What do I need to do to expand my reach with my customer base? How do I get better adoption? And with this is coming the element of time. And now time becomes at the forefront to where how quickly can I adopt these alternative payment methods to make them available to my consumer? So this new technology, as it's influxing into the ecosystem, it's causing alignment, which for me as a product manager is better because I can have a bit of consistency as to what the experiences are going to be. But there's different competing forces causing them to meet on this bridge of understanding, as I like to say. But that would be the singular definition I would give you of what payment connectivity is today.
Got it. Yeah, makes a lot of sense, especially not just alternative payment methods, but sometimes alternative token formats, right? Like that come along with those. I mean, payment methods, both, based on those traditional PAN, some iteration of the PAN now with Pays launching last year on network token infrastructure, but then all the alternate payment methods around QR based or account to account or any of the other elements that we're seeing here. So Yasser, leading product here at IXOPay, when you're working with customers, prospects, your own product team, and hearing about these fragmented systems that prospects and customers are working with, what are the critical elements for enterprises and especially maturing organizations to think about when it comes to payment methods and connectivity?
Well, I'll start off by saying, a lot of these enterprises, right, for years, right, have traditionally built these integrations out themselves. But I think what a lot of them, they run into the challenges with, right, aside from, like Kyle brought up, the limitations from their current PSPs in getting them to new markets or getting them to different alternative payment methods or even keeping up with the mandates, right? It's caused, its own, let's call it perfect storm for them, right? Where, they're trying to balance all of these different PSPs and aspects, but they don't own the data. They're struggling with the reconciliation. They have to build it out, right? Over time, right? As they get bigger and more mature, those limitations become real. They need new infrastructure, right? And that is the actual reality of the fragmentation. They need a control center. They don't have that anymore. And they're trying to build that control center. And for years and years and years, right? That's the challenge, right? Because of all the fragmentation, right? You just reach a point where you get exhausted. You can't keep up with it. That is the necessity of orchestration. That's what we're trying to bring, right? Is we are the control center for these merchants so they can orchestrate their payments, right? We are enabling them with that infrastructure to go ahead and do what they need to do, right? in a single point of view. So if you think about it from that perspective, that is our mission, right? Is we are their control center for that, to avoid that fragmentation, because it's real. You brought it up, and it's 100% real, right? It gets challenging and more complicated as these mandates keep coming up, and you need that normalization and you need that capability to go forward.
Yeah, there's so many variables to consider. I mean, even just recently here in the US, with the pricing of debit card transactions, right? So, I mean, that's just...
Do you believe that topic's coming up again?
What's that?
I said that topic is being raised up again, right? You know, with the debit card transactions, you got to be able to kind of, who can I keep up with and who's on board? And
yeah, conversion rates, payment methods, optimizing for all these different, there are almost all these different factors that you need to be considering as you're optimizing the payment stack.
Because payments is no longer, as you mature, and you're, it's not just a gateway, right? Like, I'm not working with one PSP and I just need to be able to accept payments, and it's just, it's a cost center, right? It is a revenue center now for a lot of these merchants. And in order for them to make it a revenue center, they're analyzing conversions, they're analyzing authorizations, they're analyzing their costs, they're analyzing, their risk. All of those things are factors that all have to be harmonized and played together, right?
Mm-hmm. And so we put some numbers together around, based on an RPGC report from a couple of years ago. It's probably the most exhaustive report that is out there in the public domain on payment orchestration. And not only do they have the most exhaustive list I've ever seen of potential capabilities in an orchestration platform, but they also did a lot of research around ballparking just how much of a lift it is to build basic card payment processing integrations, to specifically, I think this was in the e-commerce space and what we're about to cite here. But where they ballparked what just a basic API connection for card processing would cost to a major digitally native processor out here. And what they did is they ballparked about 1,300 developer hours for that. And I know, especially in today's global economy, a developer hour can look very different from a cost perspective, especially now with some of the tools available for speeding digital integrations right now, with agents and AI capabilities. Maybe the margins have come down a little bit here, but especially with payments, you can't screw it up. Right, that testing phase, that rigorous diligence around the quality of the connection, making sure that the updates are quickly and easily taken care of. It's high stakes, and so RPGC ballparked a direct integration being made at about 1,300 developer hours. Well, a pre-built adapter would still require similar testing. Right, but essentially the road is already built, is already paid for you, and with an orchestration layer, you can gain access to that fast lane, that pre-built connection or rail line, if you will. And again, maybe the total hours have come down a little bit, but as we were doing research for just what the lift is for merchants, this is the best that we found on ballparking just the hours, the cost, the time that you're saving around a connection. And of course, there are a lot of the depth of a connection can look very different. But this is how we started ballparking everything here. And so, Kyle, if I could give it back to you and talking about the benefits of adapters, going into a pre-built scenario. Can you start to break down, does this make sense to you as a product manager when you see research like this, when you're working directly with customers and building our own integrations? Would you add anything to some of this research or maybe throw it completely out the window?
Yes, I would definitely add a couple things. And yeah, I think the best way to kind of dial this in, can you go back 2 slides to that how connectivity works image? So I really want to drive this home here, right? So that I want to be clear when we say the word orchestration. So I know a lot of times we hear an example of an orchestra, right? An orchestra giving a symphony, the conductor directing the saxophone, the violin, the viola, all the different pieces of that orchestra experience, that song that's being made, sound, that music that you're looking for. Well, that orchestra is limited to that one team, that one band. So that would be an example of a big PSP that has multiple acquirers. What we're saying when we say orchestration is we're giving you access to multiple different orchestras, all with their own symphonies, all with their own set of songs. So to do that, each of these lines that you see connected to the ExoPay infrastructure is is a unique integration, is a unique build that had to be done one at a time by a set of developers, tested and coded. Now, the value of getting these connections from a provider like ExoPay versus building them yourself is, one, you're likely not going to be the first team or the first company to leverage that connection. Mm-hmm. You're going to get onto a tried and true connection that you would have full faith in going live. Secondly, you're going to have the opportunity to not have to have dedicated roadmap space where you're taking developers away from your core focus of a business, your core product activity, and shifting them to building these connections to enable your core product activity. So these are the values, the trade-offs that you go through. Ultimately, you're going to need one to many of these connections. And as you integrate with a many-to-many API like ExoPay has, with this one connection, what happens is you're able to quickly adopt additional lanes with minimal changes on your side because it is the same API. Now, each of these providers with their own integration will have specific custom things that are special to them in the way that they require processing. But these special custom experiences are managed and maintained and mapped within a single API integration. There will be tweaks that you need to do in order to speak to each one of these individually that are requirements based on that provider, but it is minimizing the lift, allowing your team to stay focused on what you do best and not have to worry about the performance of the API, the build of the API. And when you realize that you need a new APM, alternative payment method, or you're ready to go into a new market, or you're ready to expand your business, it's minimal lift on your side, which means you have more control over when you can go live. So that's the bigger things that I'd want people to see is this simple diagram to me is the best way to understand the value that a TSP like ExoPay provides, where we're giving you this many-to-many experience, because each one of these, Discover, Visa, Stripe, PayPal, each of these has many connections on the other side. Right? And that's the value that I would bring.
So Yasser, does that resonate with you in terms of that approach? So it sounds like it's a little more complicated than just a merchant taking their API keys or their MID and plugging it in. But is it much more complicated than that? And if when it comes to maybe using a new payment method altogether, that maybe if you've been completely card-based and you're integrating a new payment method, whether that's, let's say at the low end, digital wallets, or at the higher end, maybe a hyper local payment method. What are some of the things to think about there?
Well, I mean, everybody has it's all about validating your hypothesis, right? So if you think about it, right, we want to increase conversions, right? And we want, and the hypothesis is, if I take this new alternative payment method, will I be able to increase conversions, right? Or if I shift traffic from this PSP to that PSP, will I be able to, increase my authorizations and so forth, right? This PSP is liked by the issuers more than the other PSP, right? Whatever hypothesis we want to try to validate, the ability to have those connections and experiment goes miles and miles and miles for you, right? And that cost savings and that ability to have that right then and there is the win, right? For orchestration layers and so forth, right? It's to validate these hypotheses. It's to quickly connect and adapt, right? Versus incurring that cost with your engineering team and realizing the bet didn't pay off, or well, we didn't get what we wanted and so forth. That's where I think, the reality of what Kyle said is true, right? Especially as he talked about connecting to another PSP that does have the depth in everything that you're going through and so forth, right? And you're going to see that as VAMP rules are changing, right? Certain acquirers, are on the naughty list, others are not, right? All of these things are so true. So having that ease of entry into global adoption and connection, that is going to be, that weight is it's priceless.
And Kyle, could you build on that with maybe some real world examples or something even from the last quarter or two that you were working on with merchants or integrations, and like actually going to market in maybe specific geos or with a new vertical or product line or something like that from a connectivity standpoint?
So in 2025, with the advancement of, or the proliferation of APMs, there's been multiple scenarios, whether it's whether it's mandated from a regulatory perspective for participation in the market. So click to pay by link, these are things that are big in certain regions and are basically requiring merchants to shift quickly in order to stay relevant in their market. So them coming to a provider like ExoPay, who would have these connections to these PSPs already live and used by other other merchants, then this is giving confidence for those merchants to understand that this path forward is viable. They're able to see our public facing APIs and prepare for the moment, and they're able to quickly make decisions and feel like they can control their own roadmap and limit the damage that comes with not being readily available in that market at that time. So the quicker, so this goes back to my comment in the beginning where I was giving you the definition of payment connectivity. The preferred payment method, that preferred word, is what's now triggering speed to market. Is speed to market in today's world is not just being able to sell in that market, it's being able to sell in that market and accept the local payment method that's preferred, or the consumer favorite preference preferred method. That's now the definition of ready in the market.
I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about how the difference between connectivity and then also what it looks like on the post-processing side. So merchants do have to deal with gateway specific fields, maybe responses, different settlement files. And going back to that definition of payment orchestration maybe 5 years ago, right, where it was nothing but the connectivity, what does the supporting infrastructure for that look like? So post auth and capture, are merchants sort of left on their own to reconcile those data streams at the end of the day and the transfer of funds, or what does that look like now versus 5-10 years ago?
So each of these payment providers, they're going to offer you the ability to schedule settlement and basically configure the settings. The challenge here is, how did you integrate with them? Because each of them is going to have their own custom integration experience and is going to pass the information back to you in their own way, meaning the nomenclature that's used may not be consistent. The way a value is referenced on platform A may not be referenced the same way on platform B. So you have to have built some kind of mapping logic or being able to interpret this and present it to your internal teams and to your direct customers in the most appropriate way. So this becomes a challenge if you've always been doing business in one way and you've done your own pre-built integration, and say you've had this one really strong integration that's been working for you, and now you have to pivot. As you pivot, now you have this operational overhead of, how do I incorporate this new set of information that is really similar to my existing set, but it is different. It is not exactly the same. How do I know I got the mapping right? How do I know that I did this in the right way? These are all things that are going to expand your testing cycles, your QA cycles, and potentially reduce or increase your time to market. So that's where a TSP comes into play, where they have tried and true proven practices of the mapping. They have other merchants who are already went live with that mapping and confirmed it. And as you have all of these multiple bodies of processing entities passing information back, that ExoPay system acts as that hub, that interpreter that saves it in a meaningful way, in the same way that we told you is going to be at your integration time. So it doesn't matter how we receive it, we map it back to the way that you understand it.
That makes a lot of sense. And I think there are a couple legacy systems questions coming up in the chat, specifically that we'll get to a little bit around crypto as payments. But that concept of legacy payments in general, I think, being having worked for a long time, and now maybe having some of the cracks showing when it comes to even processing card payments, is a conversation worth having. And so, Yasser, given the trajectory of legacy processing players, digitally native processors now, new hyperlocal payment methods, how do we go forward into the future? What are the concepts that should be top of mind as we're building these future-proof payment stacks?
I mean, the concepts are going to be, and I keep going back to like the basics of, risk and authorizations and conversions, right? And those things are things that we're always trying to orchestrate, right? Trying to kind of get the best out of and so forth, right? But as we bring all of these different, new payment methods in and so forth, we have to analyze risk around them, right? And how do we, and that's where the post-processing muscle is really important, right? It's not only just about reconciliation. Oh my God, end of month is coming. And the more PSPs you support and the more alternative payments you support, that end of month, cloud, that, they just become more clouds, right? Because that's how many people have to be able to support all of those different files and, and management and so forth. And that's where it's really important to have all of that in the one control plane, have that normalized, right? I think I've heard that before from, one of our top clients, right? Where he said, the real, the greatest value to ExoPay was its post-processing, right? And that goes hand in hand with connectivity, right? Yes, we can give you as much reach and adoption into the global the global market as possible, but with all of that stuff, right? The post processing, being able to manage disputes and get all those files in and reconcile and get that information and see the data and make sure all of that stuff comes in. That creates its own layer of overhead, right? And you want to avoid that waste and that inaccuracy and those inefficiencies that come with humans, right? And pulling all of that information into one control center, that's a huge muscle, right? And that's where, ExoPay comes in really, as I don't know, the word's not coming to me right now, but it really comes in as your hero, right? Because it saves you from all of that overhead, and it removes that fear factor and that barrier of global adoption, right? It eases you into it, so you can look at new markets really quickly. You can look at different alternative payments. You can orchestrate your payments by deciding which traffic you want to send, which payment methods you want to serve. All of these different decisions become a lot easier because we've solved your post-processing worrisome, and do I have the staff to support this, and do I have the capabilities to take all of this stuff on?
Kyle, would you build on anything there?
Yeah, my view of it would be, look at ExoPay kind of as an extension to your development team. We're partnering with you. Your team can either build this or you can get it from us, and getting it from us is going to allow your team to continue to focus on your core business. And when you get it from us, it's going to come tried and true, and it's going to be minimal shift for your internal team to incorporate it. So it's all about the speed to market, the readiness to be available to accept the preferred payment method of your customer, right? It's having that control. So once you have that connection built, you still have to build the rules of how this is going to go, how your processing is going to go. So, and whether you get a front end from us or your developers build your front end, you're going to have to learn a new front end. You're going to have to understand what kind of requests, what kind of rules you need. One of the values of having a already used platform like ExoPay, it's a scenario where other merchants have already asked the question of, I want to make this rule, I want to make that rule, I want to make this rule, and you get to receive the benefits of that, of those capabilities and attributes being readily available. So it's increasing reducing the time to market, reducing the time to get to additional attributes. And as you dig into your data and you learn the things that you need to change, it's a self-service platform that you don't have to ask anybody's permission. It is your own payment connectivity stack. You go in on your own time and make the rules. If you want to change it tomorrow, you own your data when you process with us. You can push it to a different PSP without that PSP's permission. You own your own destiny at that point.
When we're getting snippets in post for AI, I'm going to switch out already used for something seasoned or stable and tested. But that makes so much sense. And I think we can start moving into some of the Q&A here, and some great questions coming up. And I'll start with one that I think we were just touching on about the other side of the coin from the direct payment connections here, and how the orchestration platform right now isn't just that abstraction layer for multiple connections, but also has some native functionality around the routing dashboard, and capabilities, the custom reporting, the role-based access controls, and reconciliation. But one element of connections that we didn't touch on are around, this question just came in about fraud tool integrations. Do we include different risk and fraud connections within our connectivity? And then also maybe post-processing, integrations to core business systems like CRM or ERP systems and things like that.
Yeah, so when we say payment connectivity, in that definition I gave, one of the highlights in that sentence was the word preferred. The other highlight in there is the word secure. And secure is different in different scenarios. So with an orchestration platform, absolutely, we have embedded or directly integrated fraud tools that you can leverage. Or if you already have your relationships, we're not blocking you to continuously use those as you integrate with our platform. It's flexibility. You own your data. You send it where you want to send it, and we support you in that facilitation. So it's all about having that, accepting the preferred payment method in a secure fashion. And secure is extended down to the post-processing lifecycle of making sure you have the right information saved on file to manage chargebacks or whatever comes with that payment stack or with that payment experience. The full connectivity, when we say that, of preferred and secure, is all encompassing here.
I want to expand on that a little bit, right? You're absolutely right. Connectivity is not just, hey, let me authorize my transaction and accept the payments, right? But connectivity also includes, fraud management as well, right? And the ability for us to kind of, make sure that that transaction is safe and secure and it's been vetted. And we do have our own internal fraud system, right? That people could use that's native to the orchestration platform. But we also support external fraud connections as well, right? Where we can send your transaction to a forwarder, right, or a Riskify, or etc. Right? We have these connections in place as well, right? So we support both internal and external, right? For whatever aspects you wanna do. So again, going back to the very first question, is like getting out of that fragmentation and having a true middle layer, right? That is your infrastructure. And I say it is your infrastructure, so it does connect, and it does do the fraud management, and it does do the post processing, and it does do all the other different things that you need, right? And those are the headaches that you want to get out of, and it does have the capability of plugging another one on, right? So if we don't support one of the fraud solutions you want, we can snap it on and have it so you can support it, right? And as we start looking at other solutions as well, like recovery of failed payments and other aspects, right? Those things are embedded inside the system, right? Card lifecycle management, bin lookup, like all of these different things are pulling the latest and greatest, right? From our modular, composable solutions all the way to our full spectrum, full infrastructure, advanced orchestration type solutions.
And on the fraud front, I know that the same way customers, prospects might have a specific attachment to, a primary PSP or something like that. More and more we hear of a strong relationship with a fraud provider, right? Can I maintain this relationship with, my forwarder or account or Riskified in this new platform? So that's part of the voice of customer that we work into our roadmap. And if you check our adapters page, you can see some of those integrations live. So some more great questions here, man. Got a good question on VAMP, and I know Kyle and Yasser were recently out here in is it Anaheim where Payments Ed? They're just out here in the Southern California for Payments Ed Forum, which is some of the juiciest and geekiest of the payments conferences. But VAMP was a big topic there, and so let me just read this one verbatim. Can you explain how VAMP rules interact with existing routing logic in a payment orchestration layer, and in scenarios where rules overlap or conflict? And are there any best practices to avoid unintended declines or routing loops? Is a routing loop a thing, or is the logic usually pretty tight? Can merchants get themselves into more trouble than they think they will? And so let me leave it there.
So I'll take first pass at this. So VAMP and how I would relate VAMP, or the relationship between VAMP and an orchestration platform, is VAMP is the rules and regulations that you have to abide by in order to maintain in a positive relationship with, in this case, Visa, how they're placing judgment against merchants and acquirers and determining their ability or capacity to continue to move forward with accepting Visa and any penalties that may come with that. The orchestration layer is the hub that allows you to pivot as you need to pivot. So once you learn you have a VAMP issue or a TC40 issue or an overall chargeback issue, and you understand which merchant accounts or which acquirers those are with, then the orchestration layer allows you to quickly pivot, whether that's standing up a new connection, a new relationship to stop adding to that troublesome VAMP ratio, or B, you're on an acquirer that is, regardless of you being a healthy processing merchant, that acquirer has other merchants that are acting poorly, and that's negatively impacting you, and you want to pivot to a new processor. That's where the orchestration layer comes in, that reducing that technical lift, reducing that the time to shift, and empowering you to make those decisions on your own time. So it's a dance that you do as you monitor, as you interact and operate under these map regulations. Then the orchestration layer allows you to move as you need to move and have that dance to maintain your processing relationships with Visa. Anything there, Yasser?
Yeah, I was going to add to it, right? I mean, it's the ability to control your traffic, right? You know, to Kyle said, right? Especially when you know you may either have to cascade your traffic, right? You know, where you send so much to this PSP, and then you know, after you hit certain levels, you send to that PSP and so forth, or you send your high risk transactions to one PSP and you send your low risk transactions to another PSP. That ability to control your traffic, right, is the benefit of an orchestration layer, right? Is you know but you know, to jump ahead, right? You know, you know your you know, you have insights on your TC40 and your 15 reports and all the other stuff, right? So you know where you have to kind of send your traffic, and that's, you know, that piece is still on you, right? But we give you the ability to ease that capability, especially if your acquirer is getting on the naughty list, right? And it's going to start hindering you. You can start sending your traffic somewhere else, or you need to do A/B testing, right? That's the power of our platform, right? It's definitely like the tool and the benefit to help you get to where you want to get to along the way, right? To manage these rules and manage that regulation.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And even going back to fraud providers, what can you do to weed out, you know, pre-auth, any transactions that may pop on your VAMP profile? Because as I think merchants are understandably cagey about it, it's almost like this, like Caesar talking about his wife, right? Like Caesar's wife must be beyond reproach, right? Where even the appearance of any malfeasance can lift that VAMP ratio, and it's something that we do want to make sure to stay on top of and add value as IXOPay, both from a consultative and a technological perspective there. So let's move on to specifically crypto payments. Got a couple questions here, and using some different cryptocurrencies as not as a payment method, because I will say that we have a number of crypto-based entities as customers. Like we handle things like the payouts and the purchase of digital assets with traditional payment methods. So from a customer perspective, we do work really closely with those integrations. But what does it look like, either from a conceptual or roadmap or anything standpoint, from integrating different crypto options as a payment method right now?
I can take that. I mean, we haven't had that demand come in yet, right? You know, and we're, you know, I always tell people we're not a field of dreams. Like we don't build it and they will come, right? Mm-hmm. So, but we, you know, we haven't seen that demand of being able to support different crypto payments and other aspects, right? But we do, as you mentioned, right? You know, Andrew, we work with a lot of, you know, high visible crypto clients, right? They use us for like a crypto.com, for example, right? They use our platform for on-ramping and managing, you know, all the different, you know, needs, right? To have a market pay and other aspects, right? So it is their infrastructure, right? To ease a lot of their go-to-market and how they do their business, right? And we've built for that vertical quite well, right? We have a bunch of others, you know, like them that fall in our client portfolio. So from that regard, we do support their needs, and, you know, the ability to do AFT type transactions, for example, and so forth, right? We have all of those things in place, right, for supporting those platforms from an infrastructure perspective, right? But for us, actually, as a form of payment acceptance, we just have not had that come into play. I mean, we support the PSPs that are there and those payment methods like BitPay or so others, but in the noise of stable coin and what's happening and everything else, we just have not had a lot of demand push us into that direction. But when it does come, we are ready to add that on, right? We have the way, the means to, as we talked about earlier, right? With a lot of what we have is pre-built and everything else, to plug that into our ecosystem.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And so we are tight with the industry, especially from a customer perspective, is what I'm hearing. But when we look at some of our large enterprise clients, like let's say Carnival Cruises, right? Like they're not chomping at the bit, or they're not pounding the table in front of us demanding that we integrate digital currency as payment methods. Is
payment acceptance, yep.
Yeah, from a product perspective, it is definitely one of those that we're monitoring. It's on our radar, and we're paying attention to see when it shifts from a field of dreams to an actual need, right? And so it's kind of like network tokenization. It's not really taken off in certain markets, but there's an agenda for it, just like there's an agenda for crypto, and it has taken off in other markets, but it's just not widely leveraged as product. It was looking at the market, we realized, oh, wait, we need to get in front of this network tokenization. It's not just becoming a field of dreams. It's a real thing that's going to be widely accepted, and people are asking for it. So we built it and we offer it. It'll be the same thing with crypto. My perspective on the crypto is that it's a major power shift per se, right? Because you're talking about real-time payments. The big thing about crypto for me is the speed in which money is moved, right? The speed in which money is settled and in hand, so to speak. And in our world in the US, it's a lot, we're a credit first economy, a credit first nation. So it's the scenario where crypto is going to have to break that barrier of, hey, we're actually talking about moving the money right now versus giving you credit that's going to be confirmed at a later juncture in the payment flow.
And let's see, I think we've got time for one more question. And so there's one about, does IXOPay, can customers bring on their existing processors, or does IXOPay build that connection? And what I think the question is asking is, if I already have a MID or a processing credential with a specific merchant, can I just plug that merchant ID in through the IXOPay layer, or is IXOPay actually stepping into the transaction flow and touching the money? Maybe that's a question like, are we do we have a money transmitter license or an MTL as well? But if you have a different understanding of that question,
I think I got it right. So IXOPay, we're a gateway of gateways. So as you want to make a connection to a PSP, we've already built that connection to the PSP, but we need you to log into our platform and enable the connection, meaning the credentials that you received from that PSP that they gave you for processing, you own that connection and you come into our platform and you configure it. We support you if you have questions, of course, but you are embedding your connection to that PSP within our platform. This is why I'm referencing that we're an extension of your development team. This is what your team would have to build, and we've built it in a way that it's self-service for you to plug and play.
Yeah, I mean, the easy answer, I would say is like IXOPay is infrastructure. We are not, we're not a managed service provider, right? We are not, and there are other platforms out there that go that aspect where they say, hey, you're doing commercials with us, right? And we've already established all these different commercials with all these other providers, but all the commercials have to go through us, right? We don't work that way. You own the commercials with the PSPs. We own we are an extension of your development team, right? And infrastructure. So that's the best way to look at it.
That makes sense, and I hope that answers your question. So let's play us out. Or Kyle said we had multiple orchestras going now, so let's have the multiple orchestras start playing us out. And so Yasser, if I could give the mic to you one last time, what's something that you want everyone in the audience to take away from today around payment connectivity? If they just get one anchoring point to head out with.
I mean, I guess my point is saying, payment connectivity is not just that of, it's a single PSP, right? It's just another gateway, aspect and so forth. That's where I don't want people to walk away. To me, when we talk about payment connectivity in the world of orchestration, it's the ease of global adoption. And if that is on your radar, right, that is where we fall in, right? If you're looking for an ease of global adoption, that's where a platform like ExoPay falls in from a connectivity perspective. It's because of the reach of PSPs around the world across different markets. It's the reach of PSPs, and it's the reach of it's the various alternative payment methods. It's supporting all the different mandates and all these different marketplaces and so forth, right? So we can get you into 140 countries. Those things are real. So if you're looking for ease of global adoption and having a full control center to support that, from not just connections, but also all of the optimization solutions that you need and post-processing, that's the infrastructure that you're looking for. That's where ExoPay, falls easily in place for you.
Yeah. So what I'm hearing is that even if the world is getting smaller, the complexity around the payments for that world is, if anything, expanding and scaling. And so the value proposition of a connectivity layer that can address not just the connections themselves and the payment adjacent connections, but also the reporting, the reconciliation, that value proposition is accelerating given that scenario.
Yep.
Kyle, how about you? What are you leaving us with today?
Yeah, I would say that along with everything that Yasser just said, for the domestic merchants, it's time to understand that the global challenges and global complexity is now hitting you at home. If you're a small mom and pop shop on the beach in Santa Monica and you're trying to sell souvenirs, how well are you going to do if you're not accepting Apple Pay, Google Pay? It's a scenario where you have to evolve with the times in order to not grow extinct. If you want to be the merchant that makes the sale, you need to be able to accept the preferred payment method in a secure way for your customer, right? That's the definition of connectivity. So it's the global reach, but now with the introduction of APMs and how that impacts you domestically, now it's becoming a survival mechanism for your business to continue to sustain. And that's why orchestration is now relevant to a lot of the US merchants who are previously, they were looking at an orchestra. Now they're in the need of orchestration.
So my mom was an economist growing up, and one of the things she landed among many of the economic maxims is that demand drives supply, not the other way around, right? So whether you're that customer, selling tchotchkes on the Santa Monica Boulevard, or a global enterprise, you need to build in that responsiveness to the demands of your cardholders, to your target consumer here, and that's exactly what something like this is delivering.
Yeah, it gives preference on both sides. The same way a customer has a preference on which payment method they want to use, and as they go shop to shop, they may use multiple different payment methods just on how they're feeling in that moment. And you as a merchant need to have that same kind of presence, that same kind of capability. in this situation, I prefer to use this PSP. In that situation, I prefer to use this one. And you can orchestrate this. And to make sure I'm clear, when I say orchestra versus orchestration, an orchestra is one group that does one song. Orchestration is access to multiple different orchestras, all singing different songs, playing different songs, and you get to choose which one you want to listen to.
That wraps us up today. Yasser, Kyle, thank you so much for making the time to jump in with me and our audience today. Find any of us. We love geeking out on this stuff. So reach out on socials or with the CTAs on this if you like what you heard from a product standpoint. And we'll see you next time. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks.